Hello and welcome to Precon Decon, the video series where I deconstruct the pre-constructed decks of Magic the Gathering's history. This is part 3 of my look at the Exodus pre-constructed decks. So we're going to dive into it and look at White Heat, which is a red-white deck. So here we have the deck list. It is quite a low curve there. Most of the stuff tops off at 2, tops off at 4. So, kind of a classic red-white weenie deck, lots of small creatures, lots of burn, pretty straightforward. But let's look into it a little bit more. So, a selection of white creatures here. So we have Knight of Dawn. This has shown up in pretty much all the white Tempest block precons. 2/2 first strike and 2 white to get protection from the colour of your choice turn to turn. Pretty solid, I think. Then we have 2 Musk Decoys. Again, this has shown up in pretty much every white precon we've looked at so far, but it's 1/2 for 2 mana and 1 white tapped out creature. Really good for getting a big blocker out of the way or stopping a big creature from attacking. Just like super good utility creature. And then one of the rares in the deck is Paladin Nvec. I really like this card. I'm not. I think it's still good by today's standard. So it's basically mashing White Knight and Silver Knight together. Silver Knight wasn't a thing at the time, so I guess this is just upgraded White Knight. But yeah, first strike, protection from black, protection from red. For 3 mana, I think that's quite good. Having protection from black and red keeps it safe from like pretty much all removal. Or at least primary removal. Obviously, there's like some white cards that could potentially kill it in this set, but protection from black and red is pretty significant. Yeah, just super good. Super good card. I really like Paladin Nvec. I'd like to see maybe a reprint of it, or maybe not a reprint, but what's the word I'm thinking of? When they essentially make a copy of it, but it has like a different name. Maybe that has maybe a name that's like more setting generic, because being called Nvec really ties it to the Tempest setting. And then one of the other rares is Wall of Nets, which is a weird inclusion, I won't lie, to have like this big 0/7 defender in a deck that's meant to be kind of about like lots of small aggressive creatures attacking. So Wall of Nets is basically whenever it blocks something, it exiles it, and then when it leaves play, everything that was exiled by the Wall of Nets comes back into play. So it's kind of like this kind of janky Oblivion Ring before Oblivion Ring was a thing. But it's okay. Like it's pretty. I don't know if it's strong, but it definitely would deter attackers. And like 0/7, at this point, would be, I think, quite difficult to like get through. Not many creatures were like that big. You'd have to rely on kind of a lot of auras buffing them up, or like combat tricks. So yeah, 0/7, pretty tough to get through. Although there is obviously like a lot of black removal as well that could get rid of. But like that's, I think in combat, that's surviving whatever it blocks. And then it exiles them, and then they're out of the game for a while. But yeah, Wall of Nets. But a weird choice in like quite an aggressive deck. A few more white creatures. So 4 Soltari Foot Soldiers. Just 1/1 with Shadow, which we've talked about Shadow a lot, but it's basically just can't be blocked and can't block. Is what it basically boils down to. 3 Soltari Visionaries, which is such a weird number of them to have. But yeah, 2/2 with Shadow for 3 mana. When it does combat damage to a player, you destroy an enchantment they control. Really good. I really like Soltari Visionary. There was a point where if I could find a reason to include Soltari Visionary in a deck, I would. Just because 2/2 Shadow is really good attacker anyway. It's basically a 2/2. It's basically Phantom Warrior, and with the enchantment destruction as well. Because when I was younger and playing the game, and friends at the time playing, we were obviously like really mad for enchantments, really liked enchantments. So this was like a really good way of, dealing damage to them and getting rid of enchantments rather than running disenchant. Then 4 Welkin Hawk, the original Squadron Hawk. So 1/1 flyer for 2. If it dies, you search your library for another Welkin Hawk, put it into your hand. I think I would have preferred it if it had gone into play onto the battlefield, but I think this is still fine as is. It basically replaces itself when it dies. I think that's okay. But yeah, it's I'm not sure if this was the first place we saw this kind of like because White has this kind of repeating mechanic like Squadron Hawk where you play it and then you search up like basically the rest of the play set of it. I think it's just like quite a cool mechanic that White gets occasionally, and I understand it can be. It's probably got to be careful with it in design because you can't put it on something that's like too good. But it's really interesting, really flavorful design. I really like it. And then Pegasus Stampede. It's not a creature, but it does make creatures. So 1 colour, some white to make a Pegasus token, which is just a 1/1 white flyer. But with buyback, sacrifice a land. So this is a deck where I don't think when you hit a certain point, you don't need your land anymore. So I think this would be fine too. Like obviously not ideal. I think it's 2 mana to make a 1/1 flyer at sorcery speed. But I guess if you start buying, buyback and like play it more often, it's fine, I suppose. Yeah, just a little token generator card there. And then a bunch of red burn. So this is the other half of the deck. So we have 4 Kindles. Kindle's shown up in quite a lot of the red decks we've looked at so far, but it basically does 2 damage to anything, and then does extra damage depending on how many Kindles are in graveyards. So it gets progressively stronger, which is quite cool. Full playset of them. I always like it when a full playset of Kindles shows up in the deck, or just a full playset of anything really. A couple of shocks, a couple of lightning blasts. These are just straightforward, do damage to anything. A couple of searing touches. I've seen this before. Sharp, it's just 1 damage and buyback 4. So if you do hit 5 mana, then you can just keep doing it over again. Sonic Burst is not great. 2 mana for 4 damage to target creature or player, but as the additional cost, you have to discard a card at random, and random discard makes it just not very good. I don't know if discarding a card at random is because it's basically identical to Lightning Blast. It's 2 mana cheaper, but with the random discard. But again, this is a deck where you've got a lot of cheap cards. So maybe you'll just have a handful of land that you don't need, so you can manipulate it. So oh well, I'm discarding a card at random, but I'm holding on a bunch of lands. It's fine. But yeah, still not a great card. Yeah, if I'd had this deck and I was playing it, changing it, that would probably come out, and I'd probably just have an extra shock and an extra lightning blast maybe. But yeah, quite a lot of red burn. And then some kind of utility cards. So we have a Shattering Pulse to destroy an artifact. Really like Shattering Pulse. It's strictly superior to Shatter because it's the same mana cost and destroys an artifact, and it's instant, but it has buyback. So if you do have the mana, you can get it straight back. So yeah, it completely invalidates Shatter. And then Temper, which is a combat trick that's has shown up in a few of the decks already that we've looked at. So 1 colourless, 1 white, and X to prevent X damage to a creature, and it gets +1/+1 counters for every point of damage you prevent, which can make something quite large. And then Shackles, which is it's sort of. I don't know if it's. I feel like it's worse than pacifism because it just stops stuff from untapping. And you can pay 1 white to return to your hand. So I mean, I guess you can switch it around, put it on different creatures, but I think just straight pacifism would have been fine. Just really, that's more of a straightforward effect, and it usually has an impact there and then. Whereas I don't know, Shackles, you have to wait for something to become tapped. And then a bunch of enchantments. So Goblin Bombardment, sacrifice creature, does 1 damage to a creature or player. Really good way of using creatures who are maybe going to die in combat, like you chump block with something, and then you sacrifice to the bombardment anyway to get some damage done. Or if you have unblocked creatures, they get through and do the damage. You need the extra sort of 2 or 3 damage to finish off an opponent. Goblin Bombardment. Limited resources, so this is the other rare in the deck. This is just super unfun. 1 white mana, which is crazy. I thought it cost more than this. 1 white mana. When it comes into play, each player chooses 5 lands they control, sacrifice the rest. As long as there are 10 or more lands in play, players cannot play lands. It's just super unfun, I think. And like, it doesn't, I mean, I guess if you're playing it, so you plan around it. Be like, all right, well, I don't need to get to more than 5 lands, because the stuff in my deck is pretty cheap. But I don't really understand why it's in this deck. Like, I feel like there were better choices for a 3rd rare in this deck. But I think this card's maybe like quite valuable. I don't know these days. Like, I don't know if it's used in other formats. I don't really know much about stuff like Vintage or whatever. But I can see it being used in like a really unfun kind of deck. Onslaught. 1 red enchantment. Whenever you cast a creature spell, tap a creature. I think that's quite fun. Obviously, combos better with creatures with haste, because you play your creature with haste, tap a potential blocker, and then you swing with your hasty creature. But it's okay here, and like there's a decent number of creatures for it to work. It's weird. This is a red card. I think these days this would be like a white or a blue effect or something. Also important to notice that it doesn't trigger off a creature coming into play or entering the battlefield. It's specifically it's casting creature spells, so it doesn't synergize with the Pegasus tokens. And then Reconnaissance is like this really is this weird, but I quite like it, white enchantment where it gives the, so we'll look at it later when we hit kind of like legions, but the gust cloak ability to unattack. So 0 to remove an target attacking creature you control from combat and untap it, and it doesn't do any damage. You just return it. Which is pretty cool. You can swing with everything, see how blockers going, just like, oh no, I don't like how that block's come down, untap your guys, remove them from combat, and then I think it's quite fun. I think that's a fun effect to have. I'd actually like to see the Gust Cloak ability kind of make a return more in another set, like maybe as like a theme or a draft archetype or something, but I think it's quite fun. So what could have been? I think this deck is well, I think it's okay. It definitely does a better job being a red and white deck than Flames of Wrath, which was the Tempest one, which was meant to be red white but had like 2 white cards in it. So this one's definitely got a better balance. But yeah, so some of the options I thought. So Mob Justice is a sorcery that does 1 damage for every creature you control to a player, which you've got a load of creatures, so that works out well. Seething Anger is just a pump spell with buyback. It gives a creature +3/+0, and it's got buyback. Skytrail Falcon is a 1/1 with flying and vigilance. Because thinking about it, there's actually, I don't think there's any. Oh, there's Welkin Hawk for stuff in the air. Never mind. And then Youthful Knight is just a 2/1 first strike, but again, I think it sort of fits the theme here of just having like a cheap, effective creature on the ground to attack with. Angelic Blessing, that's the thing. There's not. I kind of wish there was a few more pump spells in this deck. So Angelic Blessing could have done that. Gives a creature +3/+3 and flying till end turn, which makes it quite a big threat. Maniacal Rage is an aura that gives a creature +2/+2 and it can't block. So those are 2 ways to make your kind of small creatures more of a threat. And then Pandemonium, I guess this is what could have replaced that limited resources. So Pandemonium is a super fun card. So whenever a creature comes into play, the controller can have it deal the creatures deal damage equal to its power to another creature or player. So it definitely speeds a game up. And if you're running a deck where you have like a lot of creatures and you're playing them very quickly and getting them out, and if you're like the Pegasus Stampede, which is a way of generating tokens, then this is a fairly reliable way of getting damage in by just casting this stuff. So I think it would have benefited by having Pandemonium. But what do you think? Did you have this deck? Did you play with it? Did you play against it? Did a friend of yours have it? What did you think? Did you change it? I'd really like to know. So put a comment below. I'd be really interested to hear about it. But yeah, until next time, thank you for listening. Have a good day, and I'll be back next time looking at the last of the Exodus pre-constructed decks.